Hello, hello. My name is Martin Nyanzu, and this is the Unsettled podcast, a podcast for those who are looking for answers. If you are new to us, please consider joining our community and then help us to get this video out there. It's your way of support for us. Like, follow, and support us as best as you can. In this Christmas season, we are going back to one of the issues of our faith that has been under attack for a very long time. We are looking at claiming divinity, the Jesus we cannot ignore. Claiming divinity, the Jesus we cannot ignore. So basically, I'm going to talk about Jesus' claim to divinity. Some people have argued that Jesus never said he was God, he never claimed to be divine. Now, once this issue, if it's credible, it collapses the entire Christian faith. So it's a strong attack on our faith. And within this Christmas season, we thought it wise that we will look at this subject again, so that as we celebrate the birth of Christ, or as we enter this holiday season, the Christmas season, into the New Year's, we shall be reflecting on some of these things which form pillars of our faith. So I want to walk us through the biblical understanding of Jesus' divinity, God appearing in the flesh, taking upon himself humanity, what theologians have called incarnation, when God took upon himself flesh, and then in the person of Jesus, and then walked on the streets of Galilee, Capernaum, Bethsaida, and all those places. That is what we're looking at. So I'm going to give us the biblical grounding for that, and then we'll look at the historical attack on this doctrine. So if you look at John chapter 1:14, John 1:14, John writes, "And the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." So when the word in the beginning was the word was with God. So now the word takes on flesh. So the taking on of the flesh of the word, that is what we call incarnation. And then another biblical support will be 1 John 4:2. 1 John 4:2 says that by this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. So the early apostles thought that Jesus had appeared in the flesh. And anyone who taught contrary to this apostolic opinion was a false teacher. So the church has believed from the day of Jesus that God, who is divine, had appeared in the flesh. And of course, 2 John verse 7, "For many deceivers have gone out into the world, those who do not confess the coming of Jesus Christ in the flesh." So there are those who don't confess the coming of Jesus in the flesh. Such a one is the deceiver and the antichrist. So the apostles taught that anybody who thought that Jesus had not appeared, or God has not appeared in the flesh, in the person of Jesus Christ, is antichrist, the enemy of Christ. So this is some of the biblical foundation. Philippians 2:7-8. "But emptied himself," talking about Jesus, "by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on the cross." There are plenty of scriptures we can use, but I think this one makes the point. God has appeared in the flesh, taken upon himself the form of a servant, has dwelt among men. This is the Christian teaching that Jesus is divine. He is God who has come to us in the flesh. However, historically, this biblical teaching or Christian doctrine has faced a challenge we call the historical quest for Jesus. What that means is that a long time ago, a group of people popped up from time to time throughout history, and they said that they are going to look through the Gospels and paint a portrait of Jesus. They are going to read the Gospel accounts and then see if Jesus is really who the Gospel writers make him to be. And in the end, to summarize it all, when they read the Gospels at different times in history, they came up with the idea that Jesus is not divine, he's not God. At best, he will be a teacher, a bright teacher, a historical figure who lived. Some of them believe that he's a historical figure who lived and had an impact. Nothing more than that. He was not divine, he's not God, and things of that nature. So this has been called the historical quest for Jesus. Now we are in the third phase of this historical quest. The first time it happened was between the 17 to 1800s. That was the initial quest. Now that first quest is called the Old Quest, because after that one there was a second quest that came that became the New Quest. So the second quest became the New Quest. The first quest became the Old Quest. The New Quest happened around 18 to 1900s. There was a group of people who arose up. Basically, these are false teachers who arose up to attack the character of Jesus, his divinity, and who he is. That will be the New Quest. And then now we are in the era of the third quest, historical quest for Jesus. That began from the 1900s and has lasted up to our day as we speak, or at the time of this recording. Now, the third quest is made up of mostly Jewish scholars who are now saying that they want to reclaim Jesus, who is a Jew, as one of them, but they are going to paint a portrait of him, not in the way the gospel writers portray him. In other words, he's a Jew, all right. They are reclaiming him, all right, but he's not divine. Don't forget that the Jews who don't believe in Jesus as the Messiah are still waiting for the coming Messiah. So if these scholars are claiming Jesus as one of them and not the Messiah, then they are making him to be one of their respectable prophets or teachers who lived by himself, not the Messiah. That is the challenge we have right now. So, in our day, if you go to California, there is a scholar called Robert Funk who established a committee called the Jesus Seminar. Jesus Seminar is made up of about 200 and counting scholars. Basically, these are false teachers. However, they go to their conference and gatherings, and what they did, they've come up with a book, and this book attacks the personality of Jesus. It's part of the historical quest. What they did was to go into some kind of gathering with all these 200 scholars there. They'll pick the New Testament, read the Gospels, and then they'll have a whole bunch of beads. Red bead, pink bead, black bead, gray bead, and then they'll cast a vote. So what they'll basically do is that they'll read the Gospel of John, Mark, Luke, and then Matthew, and then as they read them, they'll cast a vote as they go through those books or those chapters. Now this is what they have done. According to this group of scholars, if they read anything that, if you read the Gospel, the statements of Jesus are recorded normally in red, right? Those are statements of Jesus. So what they did from book to book to book, verse to verse to verse, is that they'll read it and then they'll vote. Whenever they do red bead, they are saying that the statement of the verse is authentic. If they do pink bead, they are saying it's possibly true that Jesus made these statements. If they do gray bead, they are saying that these statements were altered by the disciples. They are not true. The disciples made them up. If they did a black bead, that means no votes. That means if the scholars voted black, they are saying that none of this is from Jesus. They are ruling it out. Now, when they did this thing, the Jesus Seminar, they came up with a conclusion that out of the 700 sayings in the Gospels attributed to Jesus, they said a third one of them are only true out of the 700. So if you pick your Bible and read through the red letters within the Gospels connected to Jesus, the Jesus Seminar by their vote are saying that only 31 of them is true to Jesus. The remaining out of the 700 is not true to Jesus. They were either altered, made up, or completely false. That's what they are saying. And then out of the 31, they are saying that 16 of them are parallel passages. Parallel passage means that if you look at the synoptic, Matthew, Mark, Luke, there are passages that appear in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And they are saying that these ones are duplicates. So even the third one, 16 of them are duplicates. So you see, they are watering down the account of the gospel writers and then stripping Jesus of his divinity. This is why around Christmas and in this season, we need to re-echo some of these things, rehash it, put the truth in front of us again and again and again. Because sometimes when false teachers arise and the truth is not also rehashed or re-echoed. After a while, it seems that falsehood becomes the truth. So whenever false teaching is flagged, true teaching must be flagged again and again and again. Now, they are also saying that apart from 16 of these 31 verses being paralleled, they are saying that they are rejecting 80%. If you consider all the 700 sayings, 80% of them they reject. Now, if you come to the Gospel of John, they reject everything. Everything. So basically, the Gospel of John is thrown out of the window. The only verse in the Gospel of John that they accept is the verse that says that a prophet has no honor in his hometown. And that is insulting to Jesus. But that is the only verse they claim to be true in the Gospel of John. So now let me make a case, or let me raise an apology, or let me make an apologia, or a defense for who Jesus is. Is Jesus God? If he is not God, then all Christians have been duped. Of all people, we are the most to be pitied according to the teachings of Paul. So I'm going to make a defense for Jesus. There are a lot of evidences we can use to defend the divinity of Jesus. But for the sake of the audience, and for now, I'm going to give us three-pronged approaches. I'm going to look at when Jesus came, when God appeared in the flesh in the form of Jesus and began his ministry, there were people who were around Jesus who often either how do I call it, challenged him, argued with him, disagreed with him, thought that he was not God, thought that he was blaspheming. Those people, Jesus' interlocutors, I'm going to look at what they thought or who they thought Jesus was. So from their own lens, I'm going to raise an evidence to make a case about who they thought Jesus was. And then we'll come to the disciples of Jesus. When Jesus had come, according to the Gospel of John, and then began calling he called Andrew found Peter, Philip told Nathanael, on, and then he started building his team. From the beginning, even before they became apostles, they thought of Jesus, they had a certain perception about who Jesus was, way before they became apostles. And after they became apostles, they did not change their stand about who Jesus is. So initially, my point is that these disciples who would then become apostles from the beginning were not friends of Jesus or followers of Jesus, though they were also Jews who were waiting for the promised Messiah. But then at a point, they had a reason to believe that Jesus is divine or Jesus is the Messiah. So they accepted him. And then I'll look at Jesus' own self-understanding. Who did Jesus think he was? Don't forget that in the Gospels, it is recorded that they thought that he was demon-possessed. That was people's thinking of him. Why? Why did they think he was demon-possessed? Because of some of the things he did. So let's begin with the people's view about Jesus. That's the first leg of evidence. Yet this evidence is tiered with different sub-evidences I'm going to share with you. Luke chapter 5:21. Luke 5:21 says that, and the scribes and the Pharisees began to question saying, this from the ESV, who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? When Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered them, why do you question in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven you, or to say, rise and walk? Obviously, Jesus has done a miracle here, and the leaders around him, the Jewish leaders thought that, no, you can't do that. Why are you forgiving sins? It is only God who qualifies to forgive sin. So if you, a human being, a Jew like us, is forgiving sin, then you are blaspheming. So they took offense. So my point here is that from this evidence, the view of the people around Jesus in this context thought that Jesus was claiming to be God by forgiving sins. Not only sins, but the sin of a fellow Jew, himself a Jew. So let's put that on the table. And then when it comes to John 10:30 up to 33, we are still looking at the view of the people around Jesus. Jesus said that I and my Father are one. The 31 says that the Jews picked up stones again to stone him. Jesus answered them, I have shown you many good works from the Father. From which of them are you going to stone me? The Jews answered him, It is not for a good work that we are going to stone you, but for blasphemy, because you, being a man, make yourself God. The people in the day of Jesus understood what Jesus did, that he was making himself equal to God. So those who claim that Jesus never said he was God, well, we have evidence upon evidence that shows the opposite. So Jesus says, I and my Father are one. Every Jew will understand that to mean Jesus is equating himself to God, the Father. And of course, when they picked the stones to stone him, he asked them, why are you stoning me? I've shown you good work from the Father. He said, no, it's not the works. How about the works we can see? Our problem is not the miracle you've done. Our problem is the fact that you are making yourself equal to God. They had a problem with that. John 19:19 says that this is when Jesus was crucified on the cross, and people came to Pilate and said, what you've written, they change it. Don't write what you've written. Say that Jesus said he was that. At least that was their understanding. Let's look at what happened. Pilate also wrote on an inscription and put it on the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Verse 20. Many of the Jews read this inscription, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and it was written in Aramaic, in Latin, and in Greek. So the chief priests of the Jews said to Pilate, do not write the King of the Jews, but rather, this man said, I am King of the Jews. Pilate answered, what I have written, I have written. So at least between Pilate and the people are saying, Pilate, change it. Rather say that Jesus himself said he's the King of the Jews. Pilate said, no, what I've written, I've written. So between Pilate and the people, at least their understanding of Jesus was that he claimed to be King of Israel and King of the Jews, and that he's from Nazareth. And that's what Pilate, because when they crucify you, they have to put your charge on the cross. So for Jesus, they wrote it in Latin, Aramaic, and Greek, so that everybody could read and understand the charge against Jesus. They crucified him because he said he was king. Not because he had sinned, not because he was a murderer like a notorious criminal like Barabbas, but because he said he was the Son of God. That was his charge. So Jesus was crucified not because he had sinned, but because of the claim to divinity. So at least there are a lot of passages I can share, but to make the point, I think the point is well made. From the view of the people about Jesus, they saw him to claim divinity. The people thought that Jesus was making himself equal to God, and they had issues with that. Let's come to the disciples of Jesus. If you look at the disciples of Jesus and their writings and what they documented for us, Revelations 2:8, when Jesus appeared to John and gave him the revelation to the churches, when John was documenting the revelation to the churches, he will write what he perceived Jesus to be in the book of Revelation. Revelation 2:8 says that, and to the angel of the church in Smyrna write, the words of the first and the last, who died and came to life. So John, the revelator, thought of Jesus as the first. And of course, it's only God who is the first and the last. But now, John is assigning to Jesus that title of Alpha and Omega. And then he says he died, and now he has come to life. That's from John. If you come to Paul, 2 Timothy 4:1, Paul says that, I charge you in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus, who is to judge the living and the dead. Look, no Jew has the right to judge the living and the dead apart from God. So if Paul's understanding of Jesus is that Jesus will be the judge of the living and the dead, and he goes to say, and by his appearing and his kingdom, preach the word, teach in season and out of season. And Paul goes on and on and on. So here, from Paul's understanding, Jesus will be the judge of the living and the dead. If you come to John 20:28-29, we're talking about Jesus' post-resurrection appearances. He shows himself up to the disciples, and then when Thomas comes, they tell him, say, nope, I won't believe it. I have to see it for myself, doubting Thomas. Jesus appears to Thomas. Now, John 20:28 says that Thomas answered him. This is when Jesus appeared to him. And Jesus asked him, touch my side and feel my hands. This is Thomas's response. One of the apostles of Jesus. He said, my Lord
and my God. And then 29 says, Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
Now, when Thomas reacts, my Lord and my God, no Jew in their right mind, as Jesus was a Jew, would accept that kind of accolade. Jesus should have told Thomas, oh, wait a minute. No. You are mistaken. I am not your Lord. I am not your God. But Jesus accepted that accolade. So, my point here is that from Thomas's perspective, the way he encountered Jesus beyond after his resurrection, it was there Thomas, from his doubt, acknowledged that Jesus is Lord and God. Jesus didn't force him to say that. And don't forget that there's somebody who is doubting Jesus. Even after he's walked with him, he still has doubts. And thank God he was able to wipe away his doubts. And this can happen to all of us. In fact, people have searched the faith to debunk it, only to submit to Jesus. That's happened to atheists, scholars, very educated people, marginalized people, low people, people of all class and caliber. So if you are listening to me, and maybe you belong to one of these camps who don't believe that Jesus is God, maybe you can also search this claim for yourself. I would recommend you read the book of John. That's an apologetic that John writes to present who Jesus really is. If you come to Colossians 2:9, Paul again says that for in him, talking about Jesus, the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. So Paul is saying that in the body of Jesus, the fullness of God in deity dwells, meaning he's God. So these are the testimonies of Jesus' apostle. John 4:25-26. Jesus' encounter with the woman at the well. The woman said that, 25 says, the woman said to him, I know the Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things. Jesus said to her, I, who speak to you, am he. Now, if you're looking for anywhere in the scripture where Jesus, black and white, said, I am the Messiah, this is it. I, who speak to you, I am he. And people are still saying that Jesus never claimed to be divine. Jesus is God. So from the views of the disciples, they saw Jesus as God. Now let's come to Jesus' own self-understanding. Jesus' own self-understanding. Again, like I said before, among the Jews, because they knew that there was only one God, no Jew will go to another Jew and tell another Jew that I am God or claim divinity. If you did that, two things. It's either you are who you are saying you are or you are insane. And you are claiming to be who you are not. But clearly Jesus was not insane. At least from some of the people's view, they thought he was insane. That's why they called him demon possessed. You are casting out demons by the spirit of Beelzebub. So they thought he was insane. In fact, Jesus' own family members thought that he was insane. And they told him, who want to be a star and will not go to the first, go and show yourself. James doubted Jesus until after the resurrection, when Jesus appeared to Paul and Cephas and James. Then James came to faith. So let's look at Jesus' own self-understanding. Jesus would use a title called the Son of Man. That's a title that he really preferred and used the most. And this title comes from a prophecy in Daniel chapter 7, verse 13. So Jesus would apply the title Son of Man to himself. Daniel 7:13. I saw in the night vision, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. So this is a unique figure presented before the Ancient of Days. 14. And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom that all people, nations, languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. So this is a figure in Daniel's vision. When Jesus comes, he would apply this to himself, calling himself the Son of Man, this person. So my point is that Jesus applied the concept Son of Man to himself. Now when Jesus had come, the Jews had a concept of Son of Man. Yet none of them will refer to Jesus as a son of man. And then if you look in the Gospels, there is only one place another person uses the term son of man. But even that one, it is not directly towards Jesus. When Stephen was being stoned and the heavens opened, he said that I saw one like the Son of Man standing next to God the Father. So, but of course, at that point, it was not a derogatory term because Jesus had been exalted and elevated and placed at the right hand of the Father after his death. So that was Stephen's testimony. But my point is that the early church, if you look at the epistles, the letters of Paul and the early church, Romans, First Corinthians, Second Corinthians, and all those letters, they never use the term Son of Man, meaning that the early church never referred to Jesus as Son of Man. It was only Jesus who called himself Son of Man. And then, if you go to John chapter 12, 34, John 12, 34 also, the use of the term Son of Man is there. Mark chapter 2, 1 to 12, if you read Mark 2, 1 to 12, Jesus also calls himself Son of Man. At least he claims to have authority to forgive sin. The Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sin. Jesus makes that claim as well. And then if you come to Mark 14, 61, Mark 14, 61 says that, but he remained silent and made no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. And the high priest tore his garment and said, what further witness do we need? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him as deserving death. So their understanding of Jesus using the term Son of Man was that it was blasphemous. And they wanted to kill him. In fact, they ended up killing him. So Jesus used the title Son of Man. That is his own self-understanding. He saw himself as the Son of Man. Add this to the understanding of the disciples about him. And then add this to the understanding of the people around him about him. Beyond that, he also used the term Son of God. If you look at the term Son of God, Matthew 11:27, he says that all things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son chooses to reveal. So Jesus is saying that I am the Son of God, I only have knowledge about my Father, and I choose to make the Father known to you. So he saw himself as the Son of God. Mark 12, 1 to 12, if you go to the verse 12, he says that, and they were seeking to arrest him, but feared the people, for they perceived that he had told the parable against them. So they left him and went away. When Jesus talks of the parable that a master sent a servant, and he thought that the people would treat the servant well, but eventually he brought his own son, and they killed the son. And now the Bible is saying that they thought that he had spoken the parable against them, and they wanted to kill him. So they knew that from the parable Jesus said, he was making himself to be the son of the master who was sent, and eventually they will kill him. If you come to Luke 2:52 and Hebrews 5:8 and 9, it gives us an idea that Jesus, in his humanity, grew in knowledge and wisdom. And in his humanity, as he grew in knowledge and wisdom, he understood himself to be divine, even in his humanity. Now let's go to Matthew 4:10. Matthew 4:10, when Satan tested Jesus, in one of the encounters, Jesus made this reply. Then Jesus said to him, begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. This was at the temptation. Jesus made a citation to a Deuteronomy chapter 6, 13 text, claiming that Satan should have worshipped him instead of putting him to a test. Jesus saw himself as divine, demanding Satan's worship instead of his temptations. When you come to Revelation 19:10, it says that this is John, when John had the revelation. Now, my point is that no Jew in their right mind will accept worship from another Jew, okay, or anybody else. So if you go to Revelation 19:10, when the angel appeared to John, and John fell down, became unconscious.
he attempted to bow before the angel. Look at what the angel told him. Then I fell down at his feet to worship him. But he said to me, you must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers who hold to the testimony of Jesus. Worship God. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. So the angel said, no, you can't bow down before me. I am not God. You shall not worship me. Worship God alone. If you come to the New Testament teachings, the New Testament over and over again taught that only God accepts worship. And it was very clear that Jesus took worship. If you come to Matthew 14:33, when Jesus had performed miracles by speaking to the storm and calming the storm, the Bible said that, and those in the boat worship him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. Jesus didn't say, no, stop it, don't worship me. But he took worship, meaning that he's divine. Matthew 8:2-3. And behold, a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. A leper kneels before him and says, Lord, give him some reverence that nobody will accept. Peter never accepted it from Cornelius. Say, no, wake up, get up. I am also a human being like you. No Jew will let another Jew bow before them. But for Jesus, the lepers and the sick come to him, they bow before him, and they call him Lord, and he does not reject. All right, so he says that a leper came to him and knelt before him, saying, Lord, if you will, you can make me clean. And Jesus stretched out his hand. He thought he was Lord. So he stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will, be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Thank God for this miracle. Thank God for this healing. Jesus indeed is Lord, even over sicknesses. Matthew 9:18. While he was saying these things to them, behold, a ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, my daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. The ruler came to kneel before Jesus and made a request. They gave him that reverence. They worshipped him, and he took it. John 9:35, Jesus heard that they had cast him out. This was when he healed the blind man. And the leaders went to the parents asking him, is this your son? And they said, we don't know. Ask him. He's of age. Eventually, they cast him out. When Jesus heard they had cast him out, and having found him, said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? The blind man even knew who the Son of Man was. It was a title referring to the divine or the Messiah. 37, Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. I mean, how clear can this be? He said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. And Jesus took the worship. So it's an evidence that Jesus is divine. To close this up, what was Jesus' reason for taking worship, calling himself Son of Man, Son of God, and all of that? If you survey the scriptures, the prophecies about Jesus, he fulfilled them. These prophecies were written way before his birth. That he'll be born of a woman, born of a virgin, of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Judah, of the house of David, born in Bethlehem, would cleanse the temple, will be rejected by the Jews, will be crucified with thieves, will die a humiliating death, will rise from the dead, will ascend into heaven, and sit at the right hand of God. He has fulfilled all of it. In fact, there is more. How his clothes will be divided. All of that were prophesied. He fulfilled all of it. Guy is divine. We don't need more evidence than that. If you talk of the miracles he performed, John 10:38 says that when Jesus told the people, but if I do them, even though you do not believe me, believe the works, that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father. If you don't believe I'm the Son of Man, Son of God, look at the works I'm doing. My works speak for itself. That's Jesus' testimony. And now, if we talk of the miracles, turning water into wine, walking on water, multiplying bread, opening the eyes of the blind, causing the lame to walk, casting out of demons, healing the multitude of their sickness, including leprosy, raising the dead several times. You put it all together. That's why Nicodemus came and said, Rabbi, if God were not with you, if you were not validated by God, you could not do the things you are doing. So, Jesus in his miracle, Jesus in the fulfillment of prophecy is divine. And of course, finally, his sinless life, the sinless life he lived. Pilate examined him. Luke 23:4 says, I've examined him and find no guilt in him. No mistake. If you and I live with each other for a day or two, you will see my weakness, I will see your weakness. The disciples of Jesus walked with him for 3 years and counted. They never found a single flaw. All the gods of the religions, major religions in the world today, had sins. In fact, it's in all their sacred books. But for Jesus, his enemies and interlocutors could not even find a single stain of sin. Jesus is pure. Jesus is clean. Jesus is holy. Jesus is righteous. Jesus is sinless because he's God. And then the soldiers at the foot of the cross, Luke 23:47, exclaimed, certainly this man is innocent. The thief on the cross, one of them said, if you are, save yourself and save her. The other one says, well, we deserve to die. He has not done anything else. He said, remember me when you go to paradise. Jesus says, today, be with me in paradise. The thief even saw that they had sinned, but for Jesus, he's sinless. John 8:46. When Jesus was once challenged by his accusers, he asked them, which one of you accused me of sin? And the Bible said nobody was able to accuse him of sin. Hebrews 4:15 tells us that Jesus, though he was man, was tempted on many sides, yet without sin. Without sin. So I just want you to know these are some of the refreshing evidences within Scripture that we can use to defend Jesus' divinity, claim to divinity. The Jesus we cannot ignore. Scholars have not been able to write him off. The more they write him off, the more he appears and resurfaces again. Though they crucified him, he lives by spirit in his followers and is very much alive and active. In this season, Christmas season and New Year's season, I pray that you refresh on some of these facts of our faith and then share it with people you know. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Unsettled podcast. This podcast can be found on all platforms where you stream your podcast, on YouTube and on our website, liveunsettled.org. Until next time, know that finding faith is a journey. And from time to time, you will be living unsettled. Merry Christmas and a happy New Year.